Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of Wicked Things at Boom Studios, or Boombox, I guess this time, and Steeple, the Silvery Moon on his website. Scary Go Round. It's John Allison. Thanks for coming on, John.
Hi, David. Glad to be here.
So, how are you doing? How are things? That's my first question for you.
Well, David, I actually consider myself well prepared for the circumstances we find ourselves in because I pretty much had a cough since November of last year. So I've really practiced for coronavirus. You know, I can imagine that I might have had the symptoms at any point. I've got such a, you know how, you know, there's like 50 words for snow in Inuit culture, supposedly. I've got 50 different kinds of cough, and I think I've pretty much categorized them all at this point. So I'm just using my experience to help guide, you know, people close to me through the experience of maybe coughing.
So really, you're like more of a cough scientist than a cartoonist at this point.
I think so. I think I've probably spent more time coughing than I have making comics since like the Thought Bubble Festival last year in November. Yeah.
Wow. I totally like inappropriately prepared for this because I was really going for the comic angle, but I didn't realize that the cough thing had changed. Actually, I do have to admit, I saw that. I mean, I'm not going to say that I took solace in your illness, John, which sounds really bad, but like I'm on like, yesterday was officially like the beginning of week 4 for me for like having a cough, and it's really annoying because, you know, it's like sometimes you just want to like know what's going on with you. But when I saw that, I was like, you know what? Maybe sometimes people just have a cough for a really long time, and like that's what it is. And I was like, oh, thanks, John. You made me feel better.
Yeah, well, can I give a message to your readers, and especially the professionals listening? Sure. When I went to the doctors after months of coughing, they told me my vitamin D levels were basically on the floor, which meant my immune system had given up, which was I hadn't seen the sun pretty much for months. So go outside, friends.
Yes.
To the sun. Let it play across your face for, at least, a few minutes a day, because otherwise you'll end up as a professional cougher.
While being appropriate about social distancing. Very important.
Well, remember, we're quite a long way from the sun, so as long as your distance from the sun is safe enough that you're not going to get incinerated, I'd still, stick your head out of the window at least. Second floor window, so you're a safe social distance from any passers-by.
Exactly. So no sunshine-based systems or situations like with Danny Boyle. That seems like it might be a little bit too far. But so how are things over yonder? Everything good?
In the UK? Oh, amazing. With our competent leaders and their competent leadership, we've all been electing the very best people to be in charge of our countries over the last kind of 4 or 5 years. And things are tip top here. I've never had more faith that everything was going to be fine. And if you detect a note of irony in that, you're wrong. Oh. I just couldn't imagine where you would get that from. No, it's scary, David. It's scary. I want people to know I'm scared, but I'm trying to spread good vibes. There's a lot of people on Twitter frightening the living daylights out of each other, so I'm trying to only project positivity into the public sphere. Yeah, I think that's kind of important at times like this.
I do too. Yeah, and I like to think, what would Lottie Grote do? And she would somehow find answers, because that's what Lottie Grote does. So that's what we're really here to talk about. We're going to talk about 2 different things today. We're going to talk about the greatness of Lottie Grote and Wicked Things, and we're also going to talk about John's glorious streaming recommendations. But I want to start with Wicked Things because that arrived this week. John, I have to tell you a horror story before we get into it.
Sure.
Are you ready for this?
Yes.
I was foolishly in the bath last night, reading Wicked Things again, my second time. I was luxuriating as I was taking a bath, and I coughed, and the most tragic thing happened. It's very expected, but my copy actually dipped into the water as my wife was in there, and she was like, "What are you doing?"
Well,
and I was like,
CGC grading's ruined now. You're not going to be able to slab that, are you?
I know, it's terrible. I was just thinking about finding a CGC grader in town that could come over and stay 6 feet apart and then grade it, but now I can't. So I guess that I just have a waterlogged copy that my cat actually literally slapped off a table this morning. So it's been a tough time for Wicked Things, but the good news is it's designed for reading, not for CGCing, and I'm going to get into a spiel about what the book's all about. It's your old Giant Days partners of Max Sarin, Whitney Kogar, and Jim Campbell. And to use the synopsis, because I'm guessing you wrote this synopsis, or the solicit. 19-year-old Charlotte Grote has her whole life ahead of her. Headed straight to Oxford in a future as a real detective until she's framed for murder. Give the choice between going to jail basically forever or joining the police. Lottie decides to hit the beat, all while trying to find the real murderer. Lottie may have been running rings around the police since her 9th birthday, but she's been on the side of the security tape. Could the future of law enforcement be 5'2" with an extremely strong bangs game? Yes. Very yes. So, for those that don't know, Charlotte Grote, a.k.a. Lottie Grote, a.k.a. the GOAT, the greatest of all time, she has been a recurring character since Scary Go Round. I mean, she first appeared in, like, the mid-aughts, yeah?
2009 is
2009.
She appears right at the start of the final year of Scary Go Round, I think.
Okay. So I'm curious, like you obviously have a lot of things going on. There's always, you have like the broader Bobbinsverse between Bobbins and Scary Go Round and and Bad Machinery and Giant Days and et cetera, et cetera. Why did you decide to do Wicked Things? And specifically, the thing that I think is really fantastic is like you're working with Max again. Why did you decide to work with Max again on this book?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is kind of a confection in order to kind of keep the team together, really. Because I wanted to keep working with Max as long as I could, because I think Max eventually is destined for very high-profile things, just based on their skill as an artist and their growing skill set as well. So, you know, really, I wanted to cling on as long as I could to the dream, because, you know, it is a dream to have your pages drawn by somebody who's that good. So I'd done a webcomic series that I then published called Murder, She Writes, which was a Charlotte Grote solo story that kind of, it just fell between two Bad Machinery stories. I was doing, before Bad Machinery was published by Oni, I had kind of a break between the publishing of my collections and those Bad Machinery books coming out. So I was having to kind of put minis together to sell at conventions and off my website, just to kind of financially bridge those two periods. So I did a few, and Giant Days was some of those minis, the original ones that I did. And I did Murder, She Writes, which was a solo Lottie story where she and Shelley Winters from Scary Go Round went to like a kind of retreat, a writer's retreat, and solved a kind of Agatha Christie style, you know, they get snowed in, or I think they get snowed in, yeah, and you know, and communications get cut off, the classic kind of setup. And I tried to write it in that style. I worked out how those stories worked, and then I kind of reverse engineered one. I drew up a grid with all the suspects and worked out their motivations and things like that, and did it that way. And it was a very popular book. I think I probably sold 2,500 of them.
Wow.
Just off my website. Yeah, and in person, you know, people loved that book. I had to keep reprinting it. And I think it sold the most of any self-published book that I did. So I always had that in mind as a project to do. But obviously Charlotte was part of Bad Machinery. There wasn't a huge scope for doing more of those stories. And also that was kind of a special story in that as she got older, it kind of became less appropriate for her to behave in certain ways in an adult setting, and I kind of couldn't work out how to do it. There was a follow-up that I came up with called Yoga, She Writes, which was about yoga and influences, but it trod a bit on kind of Snot Girl. Like when Snot Girl came out, I looked at it and thought, this is actually a bit close. There were some things in it that Brian had done and written in that, but I thought, yeah, it's a little bit close to that, so I'm not going to do that now. So really, then it got rolled over into past Bad Machinery and a project that was ready to go when Giant Days finished.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because you mentioned Shelley and her appearance in Murder, She Writes, and I think it's really fascinating. Obviously, the Bobbinsverse is like this connected universe, and like a lot of characters like have appeared in like the varying stories. Like, you know, when Charlotte first appeared, so Shauna Wickle was in there. A very, very different version of Shauna in some ways. She was like kind of the wild child version of Shauna.
Yes.
And it's I love the fact that you have all these connected players. But I do, you know, I've asked you before when you came on for the power rankings, like which characters are the most like you? And that's an entirely different question than the one I'm going to touch on now. I feel like is Lottie one of your favorite children?
She is one of my favorite children. I mean, I have to say, as she's got older, you kind of like, she was precocious when she was 13. I think the one of the things about her when you see her here when she's sort of 18, 19. The age 19, by the way, I didn't come up with that. I don't know. She's only 18. It appears on everything now. That's going to have to be canonical.
She also doesn't go to Oxford, which I thought
No,
was
she doesn't.
interesting.
Oh, well, the solicits are usually half what I wrote in my original synopsis and then half the wild and fevered imaginings of the editorial team. And do you know what?
Oh,
They have to put up with me, so I let them have their way. It's
sure.
fine, you know. They've got to live with whatever nonsense I send them. So, what was I saying? I've lost my
Your favorite children.
Oh yeah, so like and now she's not a child. She's kind of she's like a, you know, like child stars grow up and they keep the same face, and when they were kids they were cute, but as
Yeah.
they get to being adults, they start to become, they look slightly wrong. They don't, you know, if you hadn't seen them as a very famous child, you'd see them as an adult and you wouldn't think twice about their face, but because you see the child's face in the adult's face, there's a kind of disconnect, a kind of like sort of two things hovering, one face hovering over another, that creates a strangeness about people. And that's how I kind of see Lottie as an adult. She's not the kind of charismatic, kind of sassy kid. She's quite an odd adult, an odd proto adult. You know, she's foregone a lot of the normal rituals of teenagerdom because she's kind of been quite driven as a detective. So while she was a favorite child, as an adult, I think she's as problematic as any child star in who she's become. And I think that kind of drives the series a little bit.
Well, actually, first off, I do want to say that I feel like you kind of sort of address that to a certain degree, in the sense that there's that very, very. I'm trying to think of a better way to describe him, but it's just the way it is. Douchey guy Norris Overton the Fourth from America, who he's just like a smarmy jerk, and he very clearly has like love for Lottie, but he very quickly like addresses the fact that, you know, most of the time teen detectives don't become adult detectives, and he's like, I'm going to dominate the scene for the next 50 years and you're going to be having babies. And you know, I feel like you kind of address that in like the awkward fit where it's like that 14 to 18, you know, the geriatric category for teen sleuth of the year. I feel like, or teen detective of the year. I feel like you kind of addressed that there, but I was more speaking to like your creations, because when you look at like, you know, Shelley Winters appears a lot throughout. You know, Esther is somebody who recurs a lot. I mean, Desmond appears everywhere, including your newsletters. I guess like I feel like Lottie has to be, if there was like a John Allison Mount Rushmore of characters, like Lottie would have to be like, that'd be one of the faces that you put on there first. You lock it in.
I have to be careful.
Oh no,
because I think you like Lottie more than I do.
Oh no,
I think I'm quite willing to put her in bad situations, because I think I have a kind of a conflicted relationship with this character that I don't think maybe comes across, because you know, like obviously if you don't ask you don't get told. I think Lottie is someone who needs to be taught a few lessons in life, and that's kind of how I arrived at this series. If she'd kind of gone on in the Murder She Writes, like just kind of being more and more powerful. But this series is kind of about when you go to work and you find out you're not as smart as you thought you were.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when you thought you knew everything, and then you're suddenly thrust into a world where your powers just do not apply. Because every time I moved up a level kind of in life, like when I went into like, I took like, in Britain you could take what was called the 11 plus, and it would mean you would get to go to a selective kind of school. I didn't go to like a private school, but you had to take an exam to go to it, and I actually failed that exam because I just wasn't ready for the level that it presented. And in the end, my mother had to go to like a panel and speak up on my behalf. My mum's quite a meek woman, and it was just like, wow, she went and did that. And she's a pretty shy person, and because I'd only missed out by a few marks, I got to go. But I remember that really stuck with me. It's like, oh no, when you step up, it gets harder, and it can get quite a lot harder quite quickly, and that always stuck with me. And every time I kind of went up to another level, the first thing I did was always terrible. When I went to college, the first things I did, it was like, oh no, these are terrible grades. I don't know how to do the work they've given me here. I thought I was clever, but I'm not. And you know, I couldn't go to college and get my mum to come in and you know, get them to give me a higher grade. So, you know, you have to work out how to shape up really quickly. And it was the same at work as well. There were so many new interpersonal dynamics. So I think Lottie is someone because she's a bit unfinished as a person, And I think as a character, she's a good detective, but is she a particularly good person?
Right.
That's why I find her interesting. Really, I don't know if she is on my greatest of all time.
Oh.
I have the characters that I really, really love, and there are characters in Bad Machinery that I love better than Lottie. But she's the engine. She's like the engine that drives that comic because she's the detective who won't quit. Kids will give up, but Lottie will not give up. She absolutely believes she's the greatest detective in the world, which she isn't. But she's had a lot of luck. A lot of things have gone her way, and she's learned how to kind of game the system of the child detective world. She's worked it out really well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the tension that kind of underpins that character for me. So yeah, I don't know if she is on my Mount Rushmore.
You've shattered my reality, John. This is tough
She's
stuff.
on your Mount Rushmore. That's what matters.
That's true. That's true. I'm going to make an unnecessary sports reference because I know how much you love sports, but
yes, sports team, please.
what you were saying about like, leveling up and everything. It's like in sports, whenever like somebody, they're like the best player in their town and then they become the best player in their state, but then when they go to college, they realize that they're playing on a team filled with the best players in their respective states. And then next thing you know, like they're recontextualizing, and by the time they get to like college or, the professionals, if that happens, all of a sudden they're like the worst player on their team and their reality is like it crumbles. I really like this one line that you said in an interview you did about this with CBR, where you were asked like, what are 3 words that you would use to like define, this book? And you said showboating versus reality. And I feel like that kind of, obviously you said it, so you know what your book is, but it's kind of the crux of what Lottie is having to face here. So, at its core, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, I think it says in the solicit, is that there's a murder mystery, and Lottie has to realize that, maybe her game isn't as good as she says right now. And so how does she like find the answer there? And I do think that's really interesting, because part of the reason why I love Lottie as much as I do is because of her bravado and because of her like endless energy to try to do these things. Like, I think the relentlessness of Lottie is inspiring and endlessly entertaining as well. So like, I really do love that showboating versus reality line you had. It fits very well.
Yeah, that is the story. But also, she is indefatigable. Is that the term? I can never say it.
I would try to pronounce it, be a disaster.
Indefatigable. Yeah, indefatigable. Because the indefatigability is as much her power. The persistence is as much her power as any kind of great deductive genius. She just simply will not be stopped and absolutely believes that she is the greatest detective. And I think that's kind of a lesson about the world of work as well. It's not often the smartest person, but the person who just won't give up who ends up winning.
I do have to say, like, because I have like this segmentation in my head of, your versions of the Bad Machinery kids are my like the version in my head. So when I see Lottie in my head, I see your version. And then when I saw Max doing Wicked Things, that cover is unbelievable.
Yes.
They absolutely crushed that cover. But then I started getting into it, and I was just like, oh my God, where's John's Lottie? I don't know about this. But really quickly, it was like seeing how they brought Lottie to life and the style and everything about the character acting and everything like that was really astonishing. Is it fun for you to see this kind of new iteration of a character you've been working with for a while manifested by such a phenomenal cartoonist like Max?
It is. I mean, you can't. It's double-sided, because once Max has drawn a character, I kind of can't go back and draw them again, and because it won't be as good. So I have to be very careful, because like it's incredible. Like that's a level of cartooning I don't think you see in most books. I don't think you see it in Marvel and DC books, because they don't allow the space for that kind of cartooning, really. And so, yeah, absolutely. God, to somebody who has such acting powers on the page, and to see them take your character designs and use them and just take them somewhere you could never have taken them yourself. I mean, it's humbling, really. I think if you're reasonably secure in yourself, you've got to enjoy that, because it's a gift.
Yeah. I remember you told me a while back over email that once I got to the point where Max was inking themselves, it really changed the game. And seeing what they're doing with Wicked Things and seeing what they're doing when like just continuing to level up from project to project is just honestly astonishing. It's like the ceiling on what Max can do is. I'm sorry, I'm turning this into a Max Sarin like fan hour, but I mean it's really
That's
unbelievable.
fine. I have Max Sarin fan hours every day. I mean, it's incredible work. You can't, I was of a mind that I kind of wanted to get back to writing and drawing stuff myself. I kind of missed doing that, but at the same time, for as long as I can work with Max, I will.
Right.
Because it's the gift that keeps on giving, and it's a partnership that I feel very privileged to be part of.
Well, so touching on that, I remember you were getting to a point where you were doing Steeple and you were doing Giant Days, and I feel like there was and you were also trying to make you're trying to do the web stuff work at the same time. And I think it was late last year, maybe it was mid last year. I think you were getting to a point in your newsletter, not to put previous John on blast, but where you felt like you were kind of hitting capacity, that you were.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's so I guess that's one of the things is like in my head, I'm reading Wicked Things and it's great. And, you read, what's going on with Steeple right now. And it's also great. And you're cartooning that, you're writing and drawing that. What was it a situational thing? Is there a limit that you found for yourself? What is it?
Well, I mean, for most of my career, I was only doing one thing at once, writing one comic and drawing it myself. I was drawing either Scary Go Round or Bad Machinery and drawing. And then 2014, I guess, or maybe even 2015. Yeah, 2015, I start writing Giant Days alongside Bad Machinery, and that was just about manageable. Mm-hmm. And then I did Giant Days and By Night and did a webcomic at the same time. And that was the first point where I started to feel like, what am I doing? I'll be honest with you, I've suffered, it started to take a serious kind of mental toll on me during that time, because I really like drawing, and drawing's very therapeutic. Mm-hmm. And in not to be drawing anything means that I start to come a bit unglued. I've been drawing for every day or every weekday virtually since 1998. So if I stop, I'm obviously doing it for a reason, because I kind of don't have to do it. I could just script books now and have people draw them. Mm-hmm. But I got to the point where no, the wheels come off. In fact, I kept being asked to do more and more things, because if you've had a successful series, you start to be asked to do other things, and you don't really want to say no, because perhaps these salad days will soon be over. So you think, right, well, I'll take on as much as I can. But you get to the point, and there's nobody there saying to you, you need to stop. Eventually, the wheels just come off. So a couple of years ago, I had to spend 2 weeks just repointing brickwork around my house, just literally standing with cement and a trowel to kind of get my brain back together again. And I thought, well, that's fixed me. But then about a year later, I was in the same situation again. So I've had to dial things back a bit. I think I've kind of gone as far as I can. I'm never going to be Jeff Lemire writing 17 books a week, or Kieran Gillen or someone like that. Those guys are wired up differently to me. I just don't have it in me to do all the work that they do. They must have some other gear that I don't have.
I think it's interesting. It's like the you become unmoored when you're not drawing, and like, do you think it's because, I don't know, I find all this to be really interesting. I'm not trying to act like your misery is fascinating or something like that.
Oh no, it's not misery. It's a sort of process of self-exploration, because if you've never tested your limits, you don't find them. But I've worked out where mine are, and I've realized I've got to back off from them from quite a distance, really, because it's not that I stop being able to generate work, it's that I start to become forgetful, and slightly discombobulated.
Is it an ideas thing? Is it just like you're trying to manage all these different ideas? Because obviously, like, something like By Night in Giant Days and Steeple and your cartooning work, all those are dramatically different things. Is it ideas? Is it balancing all those things? I don't know. It's interesting.
Oh, well, I can answer the question. Pretty much my subconscious does most of the ideas work. So I know I've got an issue to do, and some reptilian part of my brain kind of chews away at these series. And then on the day when I'm meant to start writing like a breakdown of an issue, or a block of synopses for like another little run of issues, it just starts to fall out of my head. But if you can't turn that off, if the machine needs to be on all the time, eventually it just becomes like, like a pump in the attic that's kind of driving your furnace or whatever, the water around the house to heat your house. Eventually the pump goes, it's not like the furnace is broken, and it's not like the radiators are broken. It's like the pump that's pushing it all around all the time has kind of gone, and it's up in the attic and you can't work out where it is. It's a bit like that, really. It just got to be a bit much.
Yeah. Well, it is, and also without like being able to draw, it's like the all work and no play thing where you're doing all the stuff that's like kind of a challenge for you, and none of the stuff that you take. I don't want to say you don't take joy from, but you don't have that. You said it was kind of relaxing. It's something that you take joy from when you draw, and without that, it can kind of, I don't know, it can take away from it.
Oh yeah, I don't really enjoy writing scripts. I mean, I don't like sitting down and having to write a script. I find it merciless.
You're so good at it, though. How dare you?
I can do it, but I mean, it's not a pleasant process. I can do it quite quickly, but I have to drag it out myself, having to write the little descriptions of what goes in the panels rather than just doing a quick thumbnail to show where position the characters. It's like having to explain things to other people. I can do it, but if I can just do it for myself, because when I write a comic for myself, I usually just draw it in a book, on spreads. And in a book, and I just pencil out, a rough-looking comic with like written speech bubbles on it, and then I refine that when I go to the final page. But having to type the script out, you've got to kind of employ a kind of mental picture of everything. And my actual visualization of things, like a lot of artists I speak to, actually isn't very good. There's a sort of shape language when you're on the page that's complete. But if you just in your mind's eye, if you ask me to picture a house, I picture like a square with a triangle on top. I don't picture, like a Frank Lloyd Wright house. It's nothing like that. It's like a very young child's drawing of a house. So it's sort of easier for me just to work visually by like writing things out. Yeah, so writing scripts, it's hard. Sorry, this has become. I've started to deliver a litany of complaint, but I've just become more and more aware of what I like doing and what I don't like doing through having to do a lot of things. It really kind of pins you down. You realize, no, I like making things. I like drawing the pages myself. I don't like giving them to other people as much. I feel I lose a little bit of ownership that way. But it's a funny one though, because you don't realize until you spent a few years doing something, to actually work out what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah, I mean that's 100% the case. I mean, it's like, no matter what you do, I mean, like for a long time, I used to write for a site, Multiversity Comics, and like it was when I first started writing about comics, and I quickly realized that like my strength does not lie in like reviews or like really writing news stuff, and it's like, I mean, obviously that's a bird of a different feather, but it is like, the more you do something, the more you start fine tuning what you do or you don't like, and it makes a lot of sense. But I want to jump back to Wicked things, and I want to ask. There's this one other line you had in that CBR interview that I thought was really fantastic. You said you tried to think of a sort of situation that would occur in a manga series that runs for 30 books. Literally, I tried to imagine that this first issue is a crossover with the last book of a long in the tooth manga series about a master detective. I have to admit, Kendo Miyamoto, who's a key figure in the first issue, when I was first jumping into it, and maybe I'm very much generalizing and being too specific with this, but as soon as I started reading him, I was just like, I get real Master Keaton vibes from him.
Yeah, Master Keaton. That was kind of what I was thinking of, and I didn't give Max an instruction other than draw him like a salary man. So just draw him as a generic man on the street businessman. That's kind of his, I imagined that he would be anonymous. He would be a detective who was very anonymous, who could like just move among kind of corporate, companies and things like this. He was often, the end of every case for Kendo Miyamoto would be that he would go up to the top floor and just point at the director of the company or whatever. I like the idea that he deals largely in corporate crime.
Yeah,
and that's why he's so rich. He's fabulously rich. That's why he can stay in the Savoy at the penthouse. Like even though he dresses as in just like kind of a cheap off the peg suit. Yeah, he has this kind of amazing personal assistant who's very stylishly dressed, and it's like all his money. It's never pointed at his body. It's just pointed at the things around him. The trappings around him don't match his humble demeanor, which is like part of him being a master detective. So yeah, I don't read a huge amount of manga, but when I do, I get really into it until you reach the point when the series goes off the rails. and becomes suddenly, we're just making this to make this. And I tried to think, how can we just make this to make this, but then obviously end it at the same
Right.
time? I went up with Kendo Miyamoto.
That is the nice thing about, because this is a 6-issue series, right? So you have like I really feel that line you said where it's like this is like the last part basically it's working off of that 30 volume series, because when you jump into this first issue and you get into the Savoy and you start seeing all these other teen sleuths, and you see Kendo Miyamoto and his I don't assistant I don't know,
yeah, his translator and assistant. She has more powers than perhaps are alluded to. Like I have quite a strong backstory for her, which I don't think you really get to. You see bits of her all through the series, but I'll be honest with you, it would have to go beyond 6 issues for you to get to see her in full flight, if that's not really giving anything away. Like
sure.
I like the idea that if there ended up being more issues, that you would get to see a lot more of Maki, the translator.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps, but as she fits into the mini series, you don't get to see too much of her.
But I do like that. That's one thing that I really like about your work in general is the fact that you don't have to. It's like there's 2 different ways you can do world building. It's like you can be very, very overt about it, and you can just kind of tell. But with like so much of this, like you can just read relationships, and you can read, what this world is all like, and like you can just feel coming off of Kendo Miyamoto that like. I don't know, like there's that one line he says about Lottie when she first sits down with him. He's like, oh, the famous Charlotte Grote humor, or something along those lines. And like, there's like the level of respect he has for like this community and for all these different people. Like he's, even if he doesn't speak the same language, it's like there's a level of judgment there, or like understanding. And I think I find that to be part of the reason why the first issue is so rich, is even though it is 22 pages or whatever, standard comic size, it's like you can feel like the history of it coming off of the pages. I don't know if I'm overstating the grandeur of your issue.
No, but that's what I have to do, because like a crime comic, I mean, it says, if as soon as you sort of stick your head over the genre parapet, you become subject to the rigors of the genre plot, and the genre plot fills a good half the issue. You can't actually get away from it,
right?
Unless you subvert the genre to do like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, say, where the crime is very much pushed to the fringes and the character scenes obviously dominate, and the crime will be solved very, very quickly and very easily. If you actually let the crime be what it would be in a TV show, like a procedural show, it would. The show wouldn't be able to fit all the crime details into it. You just have to kind of gloss, or you have to very quickly try and explain things and hope that the reader gets what you're trying to do. So I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that the little signifiers I put in made sense, because I've had to use quite a lot of them over the course of the series to make sure that everything fits in.
So why do you love detectives, like detecting and mysteries so much? It seems like such a common thread amongst your work.
It's just a good driver of stories. That's why there are so many of those stories, because you get to play with the fallibilities of human nature, and also it's the procedurality of them. Even though I don't think this is a procedural series, means that you've always got new material to work with that you can build the rest of your story around. It's as simple as that. It's a good story engine.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll get a resolution for the crime, and that provides an element of satisfaction to the reader.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the characters will have to move forward because it's their job, so they have to then go. It's another kind of same shit, different day, or if that makes sense.
Totally.
It's gonna, they're gonna have to do it again. And there's not every job. Like if you work in a laundry, like again, I think I could do quite a good manga about a laundry where people bring their clothes in, different clothes every day. But at the same time, you're not going to get as many stories out of a laundry as you get out of crimes, because crimes reflect the whole of human kind of malfeasance, whereas laundry is just underpants.
Well, it's kind of like So like let's say you did a comic about laundry, and like that would be like a slice of life story probably, where you're kind of looking at the lives of the people who work in this laundry and the characters they come across. But I mean, you look at like something like Bad Machinery, and it's mysteries, but you also get that slice of life stuff. It's like the best of both worlds. You can have your cake and eat it too.
Well, that was the length of the stories in Bad Machinery was designed that the mystery plot was about a third of the story, and there'll be 2/3 of the space for the slice of life stuff. So I knew how I had to weight it to do the kind of stories I wanted to do, where the genre wouldn't kind of overwhelm the kids kind of developmental stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I always have to think about what the balance is, and it was a tough balance to strike actually with Wicked Things. I'd initially thought each issue, it would be like Giant Days, a case per issue, but it was impossible. I couldn't do a little case per issue because 22 pages just wasn't enough. So in the end, I split the cases between issues. So 1 and 2 is the kind of the introductory story. Then 3 and 4 is a case. 5 and 6. Yeah, I've learned to count. 5 and 6 is another case. Yeah. And so you get a more satisfying character arc as well as the procedural stuff.
You did Steeple, and it was a tighter story too, but I am interested. A lot of your stories are bigger. Like Bad Machinery lasted years. Scary Go Round lasted years. I mean, Bad Machinery had the mechanic of having mysteries tied to it, but they all had their own stories. Even Scary Go Round. But did doing a single issue series, one that's mystery based like this, and it's a finite length, was that something that you wanted to do because it was a specific type of challenge, or is it just because it was the right fit for the story?
Well, I mean, the length of the series is dictated by the publisher, to be honest with you. Yeah, you can't really, I mean, that's the reality of the direct market today. If you're launching an indie series, it's very unlikely. I mean, I was very lucky with By Night when they said it'll be 12 issues, because that was initially only meant to be 6. But I think just given the kind of the state of the marketplace, you're only going to get 6 issues to start with, because, if issue 1 isn't ordered high enough, issues 2 and 3, they're going to order half for issue 2 and slightly less than half for issue 3, and issue 1 won't even be out yet. So you can end up in the soup pretty quickly, really.
Yeah.
In the direct market. So, I've gambled that there will be more, and which I always do. I'll be honest with you. I've apologized to nobody for writing these stories as if there will be, if it's a 5-issue series, there will be an issue 6, because I have the power to do more with these characters if I want to. I try to make a satisfying run, but also to say to the reader, well, actually, this isn't the end, because it doesn't have to be the end. And and some people won't like that, but ultimately, I don't really care.
Well, the good news is I'm going to do what I can to keep it going, because I have to go back and buy another copy to get my CGC graded copy.
David, I'll send you a copy. I don't like the thought of you, here you are puffing me up for an hour full of big talk saying how much you like it. No, I'll send you a copy, David. I'll send you a copy.
But what if I dip that copy in? You have to CGC grade it and get in a slab first.
I'm going to slab it. No, I'm going to slab it. I'll slab it myself.
Take it to the local slabbery.
Take it to the slabbery. Have the slabsmith and slabinate it.
That's good. Alaska doesn't have a slabinator yet, so that's very important.
Oh, it's quite. We've got a lot of light industry around where I live, so I'm pretty sure they make a lot of kind of aeroplane parts and things like that. I'm sure there's an slabinator in the industrial area, so yeah, I'll go and have it enslabinated.
Incredible! I'm so excited for the enslabinating. I think we've just created like 11 words, so that's a very exciting part of this podcast,
and a new industry that's going to help carry the world forward from this difficult time. Enslabination.
Exactly. I mean, you have to keep social distancing when you're enslabinating something, because the machine is so large.
Exactly. And there's nothing, if you're just carrying a huge, like kind of 3-inch thick piece of Perspex in front of you as well, that's going to protect you from a lot of droplet infection.
And everyone knows that physical contact at least like drops your CGC grade by 0.5. And so everyone knows that you're going to need to keep your distance from the comic anyway. So it's really kind of like the perfect hobby right now.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, once you've been remarked, get yourself enslabinated as fast as possible.
This is how we're actually going to get through this. We're just going to enslabinate ourselves. We're going to be in our own little like we're going to be bubble boys, except we're going to be CGC graded in the process.
Oh dear. Oh god.
Well, so last question before we get to the TV side of this. You have Steeple going on right now, Silvery Moon, which is connected to the broader Bobbinsverse. You have Wicked Things going on, but I read in the CBR interview, I just instinctively said CGC because we were talking about it so much.
Yeah.
You said that you were talking about how you're starting to feel the lights dim on this whole world. Something that you've been working on since. I mean, it sounds like really you've been kind of developing it since like the late 90s, but I mean, I think it was publishing in the early 2000s. Why is that? Why is that starting to feel like a thing?
Well, I should say Steeple isn't part of the wider universe. It takes place on the same planet.
Right, yeah,
there's no point in having like Earth 1 and then Earth 2. I'm not opening up a new Earth. I refuse to start, my multiverse. I don't think it's time for a multiverse yet from me. I don't think that would serve me well. But I don't think I can do too many of like the Tackleford comics, like the Scary Go Round spin-offs with the characters from that era, just because like at the end of Bad Machinery, which was 2017, maybe I did the last pages of Bad Machinery. I forget because it runs on Go Comics, the Andrews McNeil site as well. I lose track of when I finished things. But I think the last ones that I did were in 2017. For me, that was kind of an end to a certain kind of webcomic. And then I did another Bobbin story, but often when I've done stories that kind of extend these things, it's because I just want to draw some comics. I don't perhaps have a new idea for something, but I can just open up a door, do a month or two of comics. I know people will get something out of them, or I hope they will. Not everybody will. And even I sometimes think that it's too convoluted. I don't always feel good. After a few months, I'll start to think, I've got to wind this in a little bit and start to, open the doors. It gets a bit stale. The air in the room gets stale, and I have to open the window, if that makes any sense, after a while. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm starting to get the feeling that I don't really want to do too many more of those stories. Like Wicked Things, as long as Boom want me to do Wicked Things and Max wants to work with me, I will continue to do it because it's a lot of fun to work with people as excited about my characters as that, frankly. Who wouldn't? Honestly, it's fair, isn't it? They want those characters, and I'm enjoying writing them, and Max is enjoying drawing them. Then you're going to get a pretty reasonable product. But after that, I don't know. Like, I'm enjoying working on Steeple, and I'd like to do more on that. I kind of feel like that's the project where I feel I've got a lot more to go. I feel there's a lot of stories. I've got a lot of notes for different stories, and I could see myself doing hundreds and hundreds of pages more of it if allowed.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think we've discussed the idea of naval crime and NCIS before on a previous podcast. But I mean, like at a certain point, you got to move on from the naval crime and you got to move on to the, religion-based battling, bad guys on the coast of England, beat. There's other, at a certain point, it's like, I don't know. I mean, you can exhaust yourself and you have to find something that makes you excited again. If that's Steeple or if that's, the stories of Johnny the Enslabinator, that might be the answer.
Exactly. The slice of life comic about me just attempting to encase things in perspex. Yeah, no, I mean, the reason I like Steeple is where it's set is a very rich area for folklore, and also it's got a lot going on, and it's kind of an uncharted bit of the UK. It's part of the country that people only really go to on holiday, or if you live there, you probably work in the tourism industry or maybe in the fishing industry, or you're really rich, or you're like the drummer from Queen and you have like your huge kind of sea-facing holiday home there. There's quite a few musicians, I believe, who live around the sort of Steeple kind of area. It's where they go when they're all rocked out. Mm-hmm. They head down there to see out their salad days. Yeah.
Well, actually, I have one more question before we get into the TV part. What is an 18 bird roast?
Oh, well, a three bird roast is you know
That's like
what
a turducken, right?
a turducken, so an 18 bird roast. Now, don't ask me what the birds are.
That's a lot of birds.
Nobody's challenged me on this because I wrote this first issue 6 months ago. I'd forgotten about the 18 bird roast. I haven't had my comp copies through. I've been waiting to read a paper copy to reappraise my work. But yeah, so an 18 bird roast. I imagine the internal bird, the smallest bird, would be a wren. That's the smallest bird I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
And then perhaps wrapped around that maybe a robin.
A robin.
Then maybe a rob. I know it's pretty bad, that, isn't it? It's pretty
Claire's a monster.
I know, yeah. Well, she doesn't know. She hasn't thought about it. She's just ordered off the menu. She doesn't realise the number of birds or the manner of birds that have been slighted. She might just think it's like small chicken, slightly larger chicken, all the way up to turkey and then goose. But no, I think there's some horrors in that 18 bird roast.
Well, I have to imagine that's about max capacity. I've always been fascinated by whenever my wife is like, "What do you want for dinner?" There's two stock answers I have for her, which are both utterly useless. One is Taco Bell, which is never the answer, and the other one is turducken. And I've never had turducken. I find the concept to be fascinating. And 18 bird roast seems like a lot. But
it does. It seems over the top, doesn't it? But that's what the Savoy Hotel would be like if you were, I think you would be able to get an 18 bird roast. I've not been there myself. I've passed it on the street, but I've never been in. So maybe I should go in and ask if they can service my desire for an 18 bird roast.
Maybe when you go on your Wicked Things book tour, you can stop by the Savoy and you can, see if you can order off menu for their 18 bird roast. It'd be delightful.
That's a lovely idea. I can't wait now. I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be delicious.
And now, a quick word from our sponsor. I want to take a quick second to give a shout out to my friends at TKO Studios. TKO is a new comics publisher doing things a little differently, with each of their titles being binge released in trade paperback and 6-issue collector's box sets at the same time. Their second wave of comics dropped recently, including one of my comics of the year in Jeff Lemire and Gabriel Hernandez Walt's Sentient, Roxane Gay and Ming Doyle's The Banks, and more, as well as gems from their first wave, like Garth Ennis and Steve Epting's remarkable war story, Sarah. Each is available now at tkopresents.com in trade, single-issue box sets, and digital release. Want to check these comics out before you order? Well, I have great news for you. If you visit tkopresents.com, you can read the first issues of each title for free right now. If you like what you read and you're a retailer, reach out directly to them at sales@tkopresents.com or go to tkopresents.com/vendors to order. TKO offers a 50% order discount as well as free shipping in the United States, a deal that's pretty hard to beat. Just a reader? That's cool too. You can order whichever comics you like directly off their site as well. Visit tkopresents.com to learn more today. And now, back to the show.
All right, so to close, we're going to discuss, everyone is, probably hanging out at their house a lot. And because of that, we're all desperate for things to watch. And the good news is, a big influence for John is our television shows. Like we've talked about that previously when John's come on the podcast. And so I've challenged John before we came on to come up with 5 recommendations that he would consider both great and in some way an inspiration or an influence that is also theoretically available on streaming. So John, what would be one of the first recommendations you would give someone?
Right. Well, I've written them on a Post-it note in the order that I thought of them. My first recommendation is just the one that I think people haven't watched but should watch, which is Big Love, the HBO show with Bill Paxton, which in the UK was shown on just standard TV. But it was one thing, I don't know if anybody actually watched it. It's a show where people just stare at me blankly when I talk about it. It's about polygamy. Mm-hmm. It's about a kind of splinter sect of the Church of Latter-day Saints. And I have to make sure it's not Bill Pullman. The late Bill Paxton, a wonderful actor, is the patriarch. He has 3 wives who are in 3 houses, and they're kind of hiding in suburbia, giving the impression that these houses aren't joined, but they are. They're joined at the back. It's a very human drama. I think the polygamy angle put a lot of people off. People were squeamish about it, but I can't imagine anybody who actually took time to connect with this show not enjoying it. It's a really fascinating kind of look at human nature and difference. And no, I loved it. And it's just the actors in it are so good. It's got Chloe Savini, Jeannie Triplehorn, Harry Dean Stanton. It's like a who's who of great performers. Yeah.
That, the thing that always kind of, I never watched it, but I knew the premise of it and the fact that he had, separate homes for each of them. What did he do for a living? Because I hate to like bury it down to like this one thing, but having 3 homes seems like very expensive.
He's well off. He runs like a kind of Home Depot, kind of like a local version of Home Depot. I think they have more than one store, like big box DIY stores.
Okay, that makes sense. He's the man who can afford 3 homes and 3 families.
Yeah, he can afford 3 families. Yeah, and his wives work as well? So I think one of them maybe works, but then the others don't. Anyway, it's a good show. I think I haven't watched it for a few years. I don't own it because I still believe in DVDs. I know this is going to sound sick and twisted, but because things disappear from streaming services, I'm clinging to my DVD player.
Yeah,
I believe in it. Like you think things are going to be around forever, and then you go to watch them again, and they're not there. So, but it is on Apple TV, so you can get in there. You can reward the famously cash-strapped Apple empire with a few shekels that will maybe help them get through the launch of the new iPad Pro and its $349 keyboard.
Ooh, what a keyboard, though.
Oh, it's incredible. Can't wait to touch those keys.
I had my nephew texted me yesterday, and I offered, he was like, well, do you have any recommendations for like streaming like TV shows or movies or anything? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, do you want to come over and look at my DVDs? And I was just like, I just imagined him like looking at it and being like, what the hell is he offering me? This is ridiculous.
I know. It's like, what are you offering? All these shows that you can't get on the streaming services. The ungrateful wretch.
All right. What do you got for number 2?
Number 2, I have chosen Black Books, which is a British sitcom from the early 2000s, I would say. I think from like 99 to 2004, perhaps. There are only 3 seasons, and like all good British sitcoms, only 6 eps per season. It's a 3-hander set in a bookshop. It's a 2-camera sitcom. They don't really go out on location very often. It's mostly, I don't know if it has a studio audience. I don't think it does. I think it's from that period where the laugh track or the studio audience had kind of vanished. But it's the comedian Dylan Moran. He runs this kind of Soho bookshop. Then there's a kind of savant child man played by Bill Bailey who kind of wanders in a personal crisis, and then he has to work for him. And then there's the woman who runs the shop next door, played by Tamsin Gregg. It's a very anarchic sitcom. It's a kind of again, knockabout British fare, but at a very high standard. I mean, Dylan Moran's Irish, so he's a great stand-up, a really, really good stand-up, and he lends a very winning kind of persona to it. And it's quite surreal at times, but it's also very grounded by how grimy it is. It's difficult for me to parse it because I've watched it so many times, and it's kind of in my DNA a little bit, Black Books. So it's difficult for me to stand outside it and kind of describe exactly what it is, but it's just funny. It's a funny show.
Is that the type of thing that you can just have on and it's just like kind of brings joy? Because like I don't know if you're like some people will put stuff on and then just kind of wander about, and other people, like if I put it on, like I have to watch it. Like I remember at one point I was going to watch Grave of the Fireflies because I was feeling like having a really nice night. And I'd never seen it before, and I tweeted about it. I was like, I don't know if I can handle this. And I remember Jordy Belair tweeted me and was like, stop tweeting and watch the movie. And I was like, oh, okay. And like it was like the appropriate thing to do. It was not the type of thing that I should be like multitasking during. Are you a multitasker with something like Black Books, or is it something that you pay attention to?
No, I have to watch. If I'm watching something and I've chosen it to watch, I watch it.
Sure.
Really intently, I have to. I can, like, if I'm at my mum and dad's and they're watching some, pensioner TV, then I'm going to have my sketchbook out. I draw. I won't be paying attention if it's not that good. But often, but if you watch a show like kind of like the reboot of Magnum PI, it's a terrible show. But at the same time, there's a certain degree of you can extract. It's like a very, very dry orange that you can still just about eat. There's a little bit of juice in there, and even if it's just a joke with a friend about how bad this show is, and perhaps one particular scenario in it that caused me some mirth, then I think that's good enough. Or NCIS LA would be a very good example of a show that I would watch with one eye, knowing that something very incongruous is bound to happen at some point that is going to stick in my mind. But no, something like Black Books. Now, I want to savor those jokes and those performances.
Yeah.
There aren't that many good shows, and I try to only watch things that I want to watch, really.
Are you pro audience or for a comedy, or would you prefer more like the Brooklyn Nine-Nine situation where it's like audienceless? I mean, they're just there's no laugh track and no kind of canned laughter.
I respect the conventions of the kind of 3-camera setup or whatever it is. So if it's obviously a studio-based sitcom, I'm very happy because I'm pretty sure there's an audience there in the building. That's fine. If they when there were occasions, I think the best example of it, I think, is the first season of I'm Alan Partridge, the Steve Coogan thing, which is all filmed out on location, but it's of the era still, where there'd be a laugh track on things that were filmed like single camera.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that I don't like that, just because it's become so anachronistic. But if it's a show like Seinfeld and there's a laugh track on it, fine, I don't mind. That's part of it's part of the artifice of the studio sitcom is the audience. It's I can understand I know what theatre is. I sort of understand the relationship, and the actors are feeding off the audience. Whereas if it's a single camera thing and there's a laugh track on it, well, who are they feeding off? It's just people laughing at a pre-recorded thing, if they were ever really laughing at all. So that always feels a bit strange.
Yeah, it's kind of like in professional wrestling. I don't actually watch wrestling, so this is a sports reference that I am like totally faking at this point. But there's the concept of kayfabe, where it's like like pretending that like this is a thing that's actually happening. Mm-hmm. I feel like having a laugh track on like a single camera thing is like breaking kayfabe.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because the convention breaks down. But it used to happen. It used to happen. They used to put them on. Certainly on British sitcoms, like things that were filmed out and about in the world. There'd still be a laugh track on them. It was very odd.
That is very odd. All right, what is your third one?
My third one is one of my all-time great shows, and I'm sure I may have banged on about it before, which is Homicide: Life on the Street, which I just think is a good one to watch if you're going to have to stay indoors for a long time, because there are a lot of episodes of it, and it maintains a pretty high standard for 6 seasons before dropping off in the 7th in a way that I think nobody should really watch the 7th season, unless completists only, shall we say, for completists only. So it's the series based on the David Simon book. David Simon, who went on to make The Wire and Treme, and the Dukes,
Show Me a Hero.
Oh, right. Is that another one of his?
He did it was a mini series with Oscar Isaac, and it's about like city zoning planning. And it's like I brought it up to my wife. I was like, you should watch this. This is really good. She's like, I literally studied that in college, because she's an architect, and so she was studying basically the exact plot of that. And she's like, that sounds like homework. And I'm like, it's really good. You should watch it. She did not watch it.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. No, I hadn't heard about that one. So yeah, you've added one to my list there. I don't love all his shows. He has a tendency to get a bit windy, shall we say, David Simon. Like Treme, he's very worthy and he's a very good journalist, but he gets bogged down. He gets into the weeds after a while. But Homicide, because it's not. He's not the showrunner. He's still a young guy. This is just the adaptation of his book, and he doesn't come on as a writer until quite late on in it. It's just a really good cop show, really good ensemble cast, very warm kind of cast who you get to love very quickly. It starts off a little bit grey, and then when they start to colour up the screen, that's when it really starts going. It's got like Richard Belzer in it and things like that. It's a great show, and lots of directors who went on to bigger things. Alan Taylor being the best example, Thor: The Dark World, and all those Mad Men episodes and things. Yeah, it's great. Great writers, great performances, and like once I'm in that squad room, I just want to stay there. I just love it, even though it's so sort of. I'm trying to think what color. It's yellow, and then in the last series it's blue. That's all wrong when they paint it blue. That's when you know the show's gone wrong, when they paint it blue. But it's an influential show, but also a fun one to watch, and it's an NBC show as well, so it never gets so grim.
Right.
That you're going to feel, like, I mean, there are some dark stories on there, but they can never quite go as far as like a cable show would go.
Right.
So you're kind of held back from the pits of despair, and we all need to stay out of the pits of despair at the moment, I think.
Incredibly, I actually got a Richard Belzer / Homicide specific question for you from a patron.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So the question is why do you think that John Munch has become a linchpin of the unified television Tommy Westphall universe beyond the fact that Richard Belzer likes money?
I think it's as much, yes, Richard Belzer likes money, sure, but Richard Belzer also loves conspiracies, doesn't he? He loves things that are interconnected. Like he's written books about like the JFK assassination and things like that. He's a big conspiracy
I did not
theorist.
know that.
Yeah, it's a good book. It's a good book. I can't remember the title of it. One of my friends got it for me from like when like a library, like the Brooklyn Public Library, was selling off some of its old books, and so my copy is like an American library book. But yeah, he is. He's fascinated with conspiracies and UFOs and cults and things like that. So I think the fact that all these things become interconnected through him, I think he loves the kind of conspiracy-like nature of it. I think that suits him down to the ground.
Yeah. I last thing I want to say about Homicide, I remember really loving that when I was a kid, and it's like very much not a kid's show, but I was like, I think I was like 10 or something when it first started coming out. And
it makes sense though. It's
yeah,
got like kind of the characters in it are cartoony looking. They've got big features. You know, they're very likable, charismatic actors, like Andre Braugher with his big cartoonish kind of huge like actorly range, but you know that really expressive. And they're like the others are all sort of puppy doggish or quite sort of network pretty, but in that sort of era before network TV stars just looked like models and slightly alien.
Yeah.
You know, so like they've got a sort of friendliness to them that makes the whole show. I could absolutely see why a 10-year-old would kind of watch that. I think this is a grown-up show, but it kind of something about the faces just suits me.
Well, and also talk about Mount Rushmore's Andre Braugher, definitely all-time Mount Rushmore TV cop actor. Between that and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he's a legend.
Yes, he is. He's an amazing actor. He can do everything. He can do funny stuff. He's got enormous like human warmth, but yet he plays kind of some mean and sort of slightly dissociated characters. He kind of plays off his magnetism against the fact that these characters don't want to connect with people. It's really powerful stuff.
It really is. All right, what is number 4 for you?
My number 4 is Kath and Kim, which is an Australian sitcom. Very influential on me. It's Kath and Kim. It's mother and daughter. The women in it are the same age, but they play a mother and daughter in kind of suburban Australia. It's about their kind of domestic squabbles. Their husbands are present. It's very colourful. It's very bright. It's difficult. I've internalized these shows to the extent where it's very difficult for me to talk about them. But the way they talk and the microscopic kind of observation of these ultimately foreign traits to me. I mean, Australia and England aren't so different, but at the same time, they're not exactly the same. And there are lots of things that they do in Kath and Kim that we do not do in the UK. But yeah, it feels both alien and kind of homely at the same time. I mean, it is very funny. The earlier season, it got so popular that ultimately it ends up kind of the guest stars start to creep in. Stars and at that point you know that some of the bloom is off the rose, but it's a magic show, especially in the early seasons.
Yeah. So do you think that for something like Kath and Kim, when you talk about like the influence part, that some of it is like the rhythm and like how they talk?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, without question. The rhythm of how they talk. When again, I've talked before about trying to like channel rhythms, not so much the show itself, but the rhythm of how they talk, because it's so useful, especially when you're trying to start writing on a page at the start of a day, just to be able to find the rhythm of someone else. And then my rhythm kind of runs alongside that. So eventually I don't need to rely on that for more than, perhaps a couple of bits of dialogue. But if I can get the snap that I know would work for someone else, I can start to find my own snap.
I think that's part of. So I wrote a piece for Sketched on how like Giant Days and Unbeatable Squirrel Girl and like Paper Girls were like 3 comics I just love to hang out with, and I know that's like a beat that Oliver Sava over at AV Club was all about too with Giant Days. Is just like you just enjoy hanging out with these characters, and I think that's part of it. Is like there's that rhythm with whether you're talking about the Giant Days girls or you're talking about Bad Machinery or you're talking about Steeple or whatever. You read these characters and it's like. I feel like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an apt comparison. It's kind of like, when you watch a Wes Anderson movie and everyone acts and speaks and behaves in a way that you kind of wish that you could to a certain degree. And there's like almost like an aspirational like funness to it. And
Well,
I like that.
I can tell you where that comes from for me anyway. It's because I sit at home on my own most of the time. I want to be, I want to be surrounded by like fun, snappy people. I couldn't sit and write like a book about a serial killer and just kind of live in that mindset all the time. I'm making like imaginary friends. It's just like a world of imaginary friends and a nice place to hang out. And I think I've been most successful when I've created those kind of environments. That's what I enjoy most about my own work as well, when you get to go to places where you want to be. I like kind of making comics set in cozy spaces.
Yeah.
Best of all, like cozy rooms and settings, which ultimately often aren't the most fun thing to draw. But the more time I can sort of put them into these safe spaces, it feels very good to me. It feels like a place I want to go when I'm writing.
I feel like number 5, just to throw everything off, is going to be something like Mindhunter or something like that, but probably not. What is your number 5?
It's not Mindhunter. I was going to choose Fringe because that's my favorite TV show, I think, of all time. But I think this is the wrong time for people to be watching Fringe, as almost every episode ends with someone, catching a disease, that half their face melting off, confinement. It's not the time for Fringe, my friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I've gone for Twin Peaks, which is a boring, safe choice, but ultimately, again, super influential on me. And that was kind of the criteria. So, yeah, original Twin Peaks, also Twin Peaks: The Return, but that's not the place for anyone to start watching Twin Peaks. Just get one of those box sets off Amazon for like $6. Well, yeah, you could pay for all the episodes on streaming if you want, but if you can still stand a silver disc, they're out there, secondhand, very cheap. You can have a lot of entertainment out of one of those gold Twin Peaks box sets.
I feel like that is probably the first time Twin Peaks has ever been called boring or safe. Obviously, you didn't mean it like that, but at the same time, it's like something that maybe people would expect a little bit more. I have to say, your television love is very well known. Somebody actually brought up Bridget Naiman, and they specifically are like, does he have any recommendations like that? And I'm like, well, that's kind of what we're doing in the show. But at the same time, like, I do, like, every time we talk about TV, I'm very impressed by the diversity of like this. You watch what you like, but you don't stick to one flavor. That's for sure.
No, you've got to spread yourself. If you're a writer, you've got to spread yourself around. You can't just watch your favorite sort of thing. I'm guilty of watching every single episode of Law and Order, and every episode of Law and Order: Criminal Intent. Not every episode of Special Victims Unit. That's a little bit intense. A little intense. The first season, where they seem to find sex crimes funny, is a very strange piece of broadcasting. That's one that for the sociologists, the TV sociologists later in life, because they do a lot of jokes in that first season. They're a little bit confused about what that show is, I think. Mm-hmm. They certainly don't do a lot of jokes now. But yeah, you've got to be broad in your tastes, because if you're a writer, if you're creative at all, you've got to take as much in as you can.
Yeah, because it's all about, the things that you take in are kind of going to inform the outputs. And so if you're only just like, I don't know, watching NCIS, you're going to have, I don't know. I feel like
you're going to have a lot of dreams about Mark Harmon.
Oh God.
What's going to happen? Yeah.
Who doesn't though?
Well, that's true. Do you know who Mark Harmon's married to?
No, I don't.
Do you know this? Pam Dorber, Mindy from Mork and Mindy.
Really?
Yes, he is. There you go.
That is very unexpected.
That was the TV fact you were waiting for.
I know. This is the perfect place to close. I'm going to enslaminate it right now, John.
Oh, yeah. In perspex quick.
John, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Wicked Things, television, the greatness of Lottie Grote, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Off Panel with cartoonist John Allison. You can find Allison on Twitter at Bad Machinery, on his site scaryGoRound.com, and his work in Wicked Things and Steeple the Silvery Moon. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all the site's content and its members only forum. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show in there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD, follow on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or following me at @slicefriedgold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Charlie Chu, Greg Peterson, Stephen Hall, Dan Lee, Cameron Schrader, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Merrick, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pachalo, Thorin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Harry Sayre, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mazel, Danny Ollie, Paul Slates, Litwin Studios, Akil Wilson, Nathan House, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Leona Kingus, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Gibb, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwan, Connor Farner, Vita Yala, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil, Kokachi, Phil White, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Rob Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Xavier Files, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Brody, Ira James Udaskin, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Chris Hallrent, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert Niccolo, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in tomorrow for another episode.